Well, let me tell you the whole story of Katie and George, from beginning to end. It's a bit of a roller coaster ride, with many silly moments, but the journey is worth it. Katie and George have been married for a long time. They have a house, kids, and all that stuff. But somewhere along the way, Katie starts feeling like she's lost herself. Every day is the same routine. Wake up, get the kids ready for school, go to work, come home, make dinner, go to bed. Rinse and repeat. And it's wearing on her. There was a moment when she couldn't fall asleep at night because of thoughts about it. So she tries to talk to George about it. Katie shares what's been bothering her lately. George understands this perfectly because he's in the same situation, to which he replies, "This is family life, Kate. It's not just excitement, romance, and fun." But Katie refuses to accept it. She didn't want to stupidly waste time on the same thing over and over. She needs something more, something that will add color to life itself. So she starts small, signs up for painting classes on Thursday evenings. For her, George becomes a grumbler, insisting that he has to work more with the kids, but Katie ignores it and stands firm. "I need this, George. I need something just for myself." And guess what? Katie falls in love with painting. The feeling of the brush in her hand, the way the colors mix on the canvas. During those few hours each week, she's more than just a wife and mother. She's Katie, the artist. And what about George? He's upset that Katie is spending so much time on this hobby. Everything is falling out of his hands. Relationships, work, family. The kids have asked more than once where their mom disappears to in the evenings, which has caused many quarrels. One night, after a big fight, George leaves the house. Katie is left crying on the couch. She knows she's being unfair to George, but she also knows she can't go back to the way things were. The next day, Katie signs up for a weekend photography workshop. She tells George that she's visiting her sister, but she's actually in the mountains learning to capture the world through her lens. When she returns, George is furious. "You lied to me! Where were you really?" Katie tries to explain, but George doesn't like it. "What about what I need, Katie? What about our family?" In the next few weeks, the tension grows. Katie immerses herself in her art. George immerses himself in his work. One evening, Katie comes home to find George drinking whiskey at the kitchen table. "We need to talk," he says. And then there's a bombshell effect. "I know about this business, Katie. I know you've been sneaking around with that guy on the street." Katie is shocked. "What? George, no. I've been going to painting classes, that's all." But George doesn't believe her. "I saw the way you looked at each other." Katie's world is spinning. How could George think she would cheat on him? She loves him, despite her problems. George leaves, leaving Katie in shock. She tries to talk to him over the next few days to convince him there's no affair. But he's never around. Katie pours her heart into her art, angry reds, stormy blues. And then one night, George doesn't come home at all. Katie doesn't sleep all night, worried about it. When she wakes up the next morning, he's already standing at the kitchen table with a rough look on his face, and Katie realizes she's going to have to give him something. She sits him down and lays it all out. The joy she feels creating, and the loneliness she feels stuck in the daily grind. To her surprise, George listens. Really listens. And then he apologizes. "I'm so sorry, Katie. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you." They start going to couples therapy, learning to communicate and understand each other. Katie continues with her art, but also makes time for George and the kids. Family game nights, laughter, connection. George makes an effort too. Comes home earlier, is more present. He even starts taking pottery classes to understand Katie's passion. So, things are going well for them. They talk more, laugh more, just enjoy each other's company again. Katie feels like she can finally breathe, as if all the heaviness has disappeared. Katie does what she always does when things are tough. She throws herself into her art. She paints like a woman possessed, trying to capture every memory, every moment spent with her mother. She's constantly in the studio, barely eating or sleeping. But then Katie gets terrible news. Her mother, who had been battling cancer for years, only had a few weeks left to live. Katie is crushed and throws herself into her painting, as if she can capture her mother's essence before she disappears. George takes a big step forward. He's there, despite the long hospital vigils, tears, and heartache. He takes care of the kids so Katie can spend as much time with her mother as possible. When Katie's mother passes away surrounded by her family, Katie realizes how much her life has changed in a year, from lost to found, from lonely to deeply loved. George, to his credit, really approached the matter. He was there for Katie in every way possible, wiping away her tears when the grief became too much, taking care of the kids so Katie could spend as much time with her mother as possible. The funeral is a somber affair, but standing next to Katie and George, she is once again convinced of how much her life has changed over the past year. From a bored, unfulfilled housewife, she has turned into a passionate and purposeful artist. She has gone from feeling neglected and underappreciated by her husband to feeling loved and supported by him, which she never thought possible. And as painful as it is to lose her mother, Katie knows she will always carry a piece of her with her, in her art, in her heart, in the way she loves her family. Life goes on, as always. Katie continues to paint and photograph, expressing her grief and love in every brushstroke, in every click of the shutter. She even starts selling some of her things, which is a dream come true for her. Meanwhile, George finds his creative outlet in pottery. He spends hours in the garage molding beautiful vases, bowls, and sculptures out of clay. For him, it's therapeutic, a way to cope with his emotions and stress. Together, Katie and George begin to regularly host dinner parties for their friends and family. They set the table with clay dishes they made themselves, decorate the walls with Katie's latest paintings and photographs. They spend hours cooking, laughing, and sharing stories, enjoying the joy of being surrounded by the people they love. And in these moments, Katie experiences a sense of satisfaction that she never thought possible. She looks around at her beautiful family, her wonderful friends, her cozy home filled with art, laughter, and love, and knows that this is what life is all about. But even though Katie and George are enjoying this new chapter in their lives, they never forget the lessons they learned along the way. They consciously try to prioritize their relationship, find time for dates and heart-to-heart conversations. They are more patient with each other, better understand each other's needs and dreams. And it seems that nothing can go wrong. Katie and George have found new versions of themselves, and everything has fallen into place, but not so fast. So George returns home from work, and his head is filled with thoughts about Katie and her new passion for photography. He's glad she has a hobby of her own, but at the same time, he's a little hurt that she doesn't share the details with him, as if she now has some secret life of her own that he's not privy to. But George tries to push those thoughts aside. After all, everyone should have their own personal space, right? He's not going to interrogate Katie. At home, he is greeted by the children and his wife. Dinner is already on the table. Katie is beaming, telling him about her day. She looks so happy and enthusiastic that George can't help but smile. Maybe he was worried for nothing? Maybe things really are good between them? After dinner, George decides to bring up photography, casually, in passing. Listen, Katie, I was thinking, you never really talk about your photography workshops. How do they go? What do you do there? Katie tenses up strangely and looks away. Oh, nothing special. You know, learning how to set the light properly, choose the angle, all that stuff. George frowns. There's something about her tone that he doesn't like, as if she's not telling the whole story. And who leads these workshops? Some famous photographer? He continues to probe. Katie shrugs vaguely. No, just a regular guy, Michael, I think. Lives somewhere nearby. George's heart sinks. Michael? Could it be the same Michael who was the cause of a big fight about cheating? The same Michael who's always staring at Katie when they run into each other in the yard? George feels anger starting to boil inside him. Is he the last fool? His wife is going to some shady workshops with their neighbor, and he's just sitting here twiddling his thumbs? Just don't panic, he tells himself. Maybe it's just his overactive imagination. Maybe Michael really is just a photographer, and there's nothing going on between him and Katie. After all, Katie loves him, George. She would never cheat on him, right? George tries to convince himself, but the seed of doubt has already taken root in his soul. He starts watching Katie more closely, catching her every glance, every gesture, even thinking about hiring a private detective. And the more he looks, the more it seems to him that something is off. Katie stays too long after the workshop, or suspicious messages come to her phone. As a result, he suspects her, spending every free minute checking phone calls, spending, and other nonsense that might help find out the truth. George takes the matter seriously. Thursday, George takes a day off from work to find out the reasons for such behavior. His wife is supposed to leave the house at 8 a.m. to take the kids to school, Then she goes to a workshop and then to painting classes. He waited for his wife to take the kids, and then he began surveillance. His curiosity almost gave him away when he was walking down the road behind Katie and stumbled over a gutter while crossing the road. Arriving at the place where Katie studies photography, he sees the same paintings they made for sale on the second floor of the building where she studies photography. He increasingly thinks that things are not so simple here because the paintings were going to another state. Katie enters the building. George wants to follow her, but within minutes he sees Michael, the same neighbor, coming out and taking her inside. Following them in, he sees them standing at the reception desk where they're given room keys. Waiting a bit, he approaches too and says that he is Katie's husband and he was a little late for the photo shoot with them. They let him through and tell him which room to go to. Going up to the second floor, he sees the room, and approaching it, he hears a soft moan. He opens the door slightly and sees a scene that will haunt him for a long time to come. George's world is falling apart. He feels deceived, betrayed, shattered. How could Katie do this to him? After everything they've been through together, after he supported her in all her endeavors, after they almost lost each other. George doesn't know what to do. Make a scene? Go and start a fight? Pretend he didn't see anything? Each option seems equally unbearable to him. He thinks in despair and tears about what to do next, and in a state of complete idiocy, he goes home. Nothing can be done about it now, he tells himself. Coming home, he almost told off the elderly neighbor living across the street and crawls into the house. Dragging himself, he goes to the kitchen to get a drink to drown his sorrows. Then the phone in the right pocket of his jeans rings. It's his son, asking to pick him up and his sister from school. Mom can't because she's busy. George answers in a sad tone. Right away, son. I'm coming out now. In general, George barely forces himself to get up from the couch. His head is splitting. His mouth tastes like cats have taken a dump in it. But there's nowhere to go. The kids are waiting. He somehow pulls himself together, gets in the car, and drives to school. The whole way, the image of Katie and that Michael walking out of her studio together keeps playing before his eyes. He didn't even try to hide his smirk. And Katie. Katie walked beside him so calmly, as if there was nothing wrong with it, as if it's normal to cheat behind your husband's back, ruin your family, spit in the soul of the person who swore to love you to the very end, and trust each other. George grips the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turn white. If only he could go back now. Go up and knock all of Michael's teeth out. Why didn't I do it before? And hit Katie a couple of times so she wouldn't be tempted to change men like gloves. He even imagines her falling to the ground, grabbing her face. How she cries, begs for forgiveness, swears that never ever again. And he stands over her, all in white, and laughs. These thoughts almost make George run a red light. He breaks in time, cursing through his teeth. He needs to pull himself together, stop being a crybaby. After all, he still has children. For their sake, at least, he needs to keep a straight face. Pulling up to the school, George exhales, rubbing his face with his hands. Okay, calm down. Pretend everything is fine. Don't scare the boys. Don't burden them with his problems. They are definitely not to blame for having a cheating mother. The children are already waiting at the gate, turning their heads from side to side. It's clear that they are worried. Their mother didn't come. Their father is somehow not himself. George forces himself to smile when they approach the car. Well, how are things at school? He asks in a cheerful voice as they sit in the back seat. Didn't get any F's today, did you? His son shrugs his shoulders. Nah, Dad, everything's fine. Why didn't you let Mom pick us up? Did you guys have a fight or something? George barely keeps from cringing. Damn, how observant. Just like his mother, only not a cheater yet. What makes you think that? He chuckles, carefully watching the road. Mom just had some things to do, so I volunteered. What, can't a father pick up his children from school without being interrogated? Okay, his son says conciliatorily. But it's clear he doesn't believe it. He exchanges glances with his sister and shakes his head. George just clenches his teeth harder. Well, that's it. If even the children have figured out that something is wrong, then it's a disaster. That means something needs to be done, somehow to sort out this situation. But how? On the way home, there's an awkward silence in the car. The children are whispering something in the back, but George doesn't listen. He has no time for their secrets now. He has plenty of his own. When they pull up to the house, George suddenly feels his heart gripped by a cold fear. Katie is already home. He sees her backpack on the porch by the front door. She was probably making out with her Michael, the arrived bastard. George is sickened with disgust, but he pulls himself together and gets out of the car. He needs to sort things out, have an adult conversation, not for himself, for the kids. They shouldn't grow up in such filth. At home, surprisingly, it's quiet and calm. The kitchen smells deliciously of fried meat and spices. Katie is making dinner, as if nothing happened, as if she didn't sleep with the neighbor at home or somewhere else today. George inhales loudly through his nose, trying to calm down. The kids stomp upstairs, dropping their backpacks in their rooms. He hears the bathroom door click, water running. Ordinary household sounds that now seem so out of place, so fake. "Oh, you're home already," Katie shouts from the kitchen, and her voice sounds so joyful and carefree that George wants to puke. "Go wash your hands, dinner is almost ready." "Dinner is almost ready, look at that," George thinks angrily, pulling off his shoes in the hallway. "And you're always ready to get into someone else's pants, aren't you?" He enters the kitchen trying to look impassive. Katie is standing by the stove, stirring something in a pot. She's wearing a colorful apron and George's old t-shirt, the one with the hole in the shoulder. For some reason, it hurts even more to see her so homey, so cozy. His own. "Hi, honey," Katie smiles, turning to him. "How was your day? Did you work a lot?" George's jaw muscles are working like crazy. Oh, you hypocrite, even mocking me. Or does she really not understand that she's been caught? Does she think her husband is a complete idiot and blind? "Oh, nothing special," he says through gritted teeth, moving closer. "Ran some errands, picked up the kids. And you? How's your photo studio, still taking pictures little by little?" And he stares at her intently, expectantly. Katie blinks in surprise, but then smiles again, though not as radiant anymore. "Yeah, same as usual. Nothing interesting. I had a couple of clients. Took some landscape photos for my portfolio. You know how it is." "Yeah, I know. Especially about your clients," George thinks grimly. But out loud, he says something else. "Listen, I stopped by your studio today. Wanted to surprise you, like pick you up early. And I saw something there. Anyway, explain to me, what was that?" He almost spits out the last words. Katie flinches, drops the ladle on the floor. Something like fear flashes across her face. What are you talking about, George? What did you see?" "You know damn well what," he barks, stepping right up to her. "I saw you there with that asshole Michael, hugging, smiling at each other. You thought I wouldn't find out, huh? You thought I was blind and wouldn't notice how you were hiding something behind my back?" George is already shouting at the top of his lungs, spitting. Katie's face turns white. She presses her palms to her chest in fear. "No, George, you got it all wrong. It's not what you think. Michael was just helping me with some work stuff. He's a photographer, too. There's nothing like that between us, I swear." "Oh, stop lying to me," George explodes. His temples are pounding with rage. His fists are itching to slam Katie into the wall. "Do I look like an idiot? Have I been living with you for just a day? It's written all over your face. Go ahead, tell me you were just having a friendly tea together, on top of each other." Katie presses herself against the countertop, tears glistening in her eyes. But George doesn't care how scared she is right now. He believed in her for so many years, considered her the perfect wife and mother for so many years. And what's the result? How could she betray him, and even get caught so stupidly? I knew from the start that this was a rotten deal, knew that all this creativity wouldn't end well. "George, please, let's talk calmly," Katie babbles in a trembling voice. "Not in front of the children. I'll explain everything to you, I swear. It's really a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" George feels a red haze clouding his eyes. "You bitch. So fooling your husband is a misunderstanding? And fucking conscience. Was that also a misunderstanding? Or is that part of your photography services, huh? You whore?" He doesn't manage to finish. Katie, sobbing, rushes out of the kitchen. George hears the front door slam, and everything inside him just turns upside down. Did she run to her lover? Or is she afraid that her husband will kill her right here? It doesn't really matter. George grabs the bottle of whiskey from the table, which was always there just in case, and takes a few big gulps straight from the neck. The burning liquid somewhat dulls the rage, but the pain doesn't go anywhere. On the contrary, it seems like it's about to tear him in half. He slumps heavily into a chair, clutching his head in his hands. That's it. What should he do now? How to go on living with all this, with this vile betrayal of the person closest to him? How to look his children in the eye, who clearly understood everything today? How not to go crazy from thoughts of this Michael, who is fooling around with his wife? His head is buzzing from alcohol and anger. George sits in the kitchen staring blankly in front of him. Somewhere upstairs a door slams softly. The children must have gone to bed, tired from the day. They don't even suspect that their mother is a lying cheater, and their father is the last fool who's being cheated on with some guy. George curses through gritted teeth, stands up, staggering. He needs to go check on the kids, wish them a good night's rest. And then he'll have to decide what to do next. With Katie, with Michael, with this whole circus in general. But that's later. And now he needs another drink, and to forget, at least for a while. To forget that his life has collapsed, and everything he believed in turned out to be fake. So George takes the bottle and trudges into the living room, to drown his grief, to drink away his pain. That's all he's capable of right now. And tomorrow will be a new day. And then he'll definitely have to make some decisions. Because this can't go on. It just can't, that's all. What happened next? After that cheating scandal, the life of Katie and George could no longer be the same. Too much had been said. Too many grievances inflicted. But they still decided to try to save the family, for their own sake, and for the sake of the children. At first it was hellishly difficult. Katie would burst into tears now and then. George withdrew into himself and hardly spoke. The children tiptoed around the house, afraid to say a word out of place. The atmosphere was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But gradually, day by day, they learned to live anew. Katie quit her photography courses and devoted herself entirely to her family. George took time off work to be with the kids and help Katie around the house. They talked a lot, trying to understand how they got to this kind of life and what to do next. One day, as they were sitting in the kitchen after dinner, Katie suddenly said, "You know, I've been thinking, maybe we should go away somewhere, at least for a couple of weeks to change the scenery. Just you, me, and the kids. What do you think about that?" George pondered. The idea was unexpected, but there was something to it. Maybe they really did need to get away from all these familiar walls, from the suffocating routine. "You know, that's a thought," he said slowly. "The kids are about to have vacations. We could go to the lake somewhere, rent a cabin, do some fishing, swimming, have bonfires in the evenings." Katie beamed. For the first time in a long time, sparks of joy and anticipation lit up in her eyes. "Let's do it," she eagerly agreed. "We all need a break. These walls are already making me sick."